This is part 6 of my series of videos that describe and illustrate how to build the Three Nite P-30 rubber-powered free flight model airplane. In this video, I'm going to discuss the nose block and propeller assembly. So in this picture, you can see that I have constructed the nose block from the laser cut parts in the short kit from Volare Products, and I have installed the gizmo geezer prop assembly into that nose block. You can see here that there's an indication that this is a 9.5-inch diameter prop. So it is a legal prop for the P-30 event because it is plastic and it is commercially available and it is a freewheeling prop. That is, it does not fold. When you purchase the Three Nite P-30 short kit from Volare Products, one of the options is to purchase the Gizmo Geezer propeller assembly, which I highly recommend, especially for beginners. The Gizmo Geezer prop assembly offers three main advantages. First of all, it has a built-in spring tensioner so that you never have to braid rubber motors, nor do you ever have to worry about motor punching and CG shifting that could lead to stalling or diving. Secondly, it has a reliable freewheel mechanism, which includes this spinner, which in the drive or power mode is pushed rearward so that the blades are engaged in these slots and the rubber motor drives the propeller. After most of the winds in the rubber motor have been expended and the cruise portion of the flight, which is under power, has ended, this spinner moves forward automatically, clear of the propeller, allowing it to spin and freewheel. If a propeller locks up, a fixed propeller locks up at any time during the flight, it quickly terminates the flight because of all the drag. So this freewheel mechanism is very reliable. It always works. I've used gizmo geezers for years, and they have never failed me. The third and perhaps the biggest advantage of the gizmo geezer prop assembly is that it has three adjustment screws. You can only see two here. They're mounted at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and one down below at 6 o'clock. With a tiny Allen wrench, you can screw these screws in and out to adjust the thrust line, which is extremely important in getting consistent, good flights with the free flight rubber-powered airplane. In general, you want some down thrust and some right thrust. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later on in this video. The free flight event was developed in the 1970s by the San Diego Orbiteers Free Flight Club, and for many decades, there were only a couple of injection molded, commercially available plastic props that were available for use in P-30 models that were legal. One of these props was the so-called PEC prop, PECK, which was sold by PEC Polymers, which was a company that supplied parts for balsa wood model airplanes for many years. They were based in, I believe, Santee, California, which is just a little bit east of San Diego. This is basically a PEC prop, but later on, when Irv Ohm developed the Gizmo Geezer product, he repitched the props to a higher pitch for better flight performance. This picture shows a yellow prop, which is made in Czechoslovakia and is referred to as the Czech prop amongst free flight hobbyists. It has a different shape, a different blade profile, and for many years this was the only alternative to the PEC prop. Many excellent P-30 modelers swear by this Czech prop. It's available in a red color and yellow and perhaps one other color. So those were the only two props, the PEC prop and the Czech prop, for many, many years. About 5 or 6 years ago, a new prop came out. That's this orange prop here that is referred to as the Chinese prop. You can see it has sort of a scimitar blade shape here. This prop is 9.5 inches approximately in diameter. It's available commercially from Volare Products, and many people have used it in P-30 modeling, including myself, and liked it. Personally, I have, at least 10 P-30 models, maybe more, and I've flown every one of the commercially available injection molded 9.5 inch or thereabouts in diameter injection molded plastic props. I've tried all of them, and the original PEC prop, the Czech prop, the Chinese prop, and the Gizmo Geezer prop assembly. And honestly, it's very, very hard to really tell the difference, if there is any. It's difficult to analyze the performance of one prop relative to the other, because you have to have a control, and you can't keep everything the same. I mean, you could take the same airplane and switch props, but when you fly it, the rubber motor is going to be slightly different. It's either a new motor or it's the second or third winding of a motor. But the biggest difference will be the air conditions. You'd have to make sure there were no thermals. And anyway, it's very difficult. They're all good. They're all good. Lately, there has been a limited commercial supply of 3D printed P-30 props, and I'm still in the process of testing those to determine if they really improve the performance. They have a slightly higher pitch to diameter ratio than the other props I've discussed. Supposedly, there's a 9-inch Gillows injection molded plastic prop that would be legal for P-30, but I don't think I've ever come across one. I'm not sure you can buy them anywhere. Since the prop has a slightly smaller diameter, namely 9.5 inches, which is less than the 9.84 maximum diameter allowed under the P-30 rules, I would be reluctant to use this prop in a P-30 model, because in general, all things being equal, you'd rather have the largest diameter prop allowed under the rules. Um, there's a lot of science behind that, but that's my opinion. The plan for the Three Nite P-30 and the written instructions are very clear and very detailed on how to construct the nose block. The nose block consists of essentially a faceplate, which is 3 laminations of balsa wood, and then a plug on the rear side that inserts into the forward end of the fuselage. Here's a picture, a top view of the nose block with its gizmo geezer prop assembly attached, inserted into the forward end of the fuselage. This is a view of the rear side of the nose block assembly, and you can see that the plug consists of 4 pieces, 4 separate pieces, which are keyed. Again, all these parts are marked with laser etching, and the plug consists of top, bottom, and side NP pieces. That's N as in Nancy, P as in Paul. And they are glued to each other and to the rear of the front portion of the nose block assembly. You can see you end up with just a slight bit of overlap here. So this plugs into the front end of the fuselage, and this engages the front end of the fuselage. When George Bredehoff was setting up the laser cutting for the parts for this model, he very cleverly designed these so that they have an inward angle or taper, so that they can be plugged into the front end of the fuselage. In order to get consistent, reliable, and good flights with a free flight model airplane that's rubber powered, it is absolutely essential that the nose block assembly fit very snug into the fuselage. It should be tight but removable. The reason for that is that you need to maintain very accurate thrust lines of the propeller that's mounted in the nose block assembly. This picture shows me sanding very, very carefully and very, very gradually the sides of the plug, the NP pieces. You sand them a tiny amount, see if it fits into the plug fits into the front end of the fuselage, and if not, you sand a little more. You want it to be very snug, so don't over sand. Now, while we're at it, you'll see that this has just a simple hole here. This was a very early version of the nose block assembly. It's been replaced, particularly if you get the gizmo geezer prop option. You'll need to have a hole that can accept the hub of the gizmo geezer, which is basically 3/8 of an inch in diameter. This is a picture that shows the later version of the nose block assembly. These pieces get laminated as shown in the instructions on the plan and in the written instructions. They get laminated cross grain, and you can see there's a hole. These holes have little slots at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. Those slots accept corresponding ribs, which are on the base, the cylindrical base of the gizmo geyser. Back here is an attachment that receives the sleeved clevis that you mount to the forward end of the rubber motor as shown in the gizmo geyser instructions. While we're at it, look at this tape here. One of the things that you want to do is just hold the propeller and make sure there's no breeze or wind. Hopefully you're inside a house. And if one blade falls down to the bottom, that means that it's heavier. And you need to put Scotch tape on the rear side of the lighter blade, just enough tape to dynamically balance the prop. And you'll know that when the propeller no longer spins on its own, when you're just holding this with your fingers so that this can freely spin. If you don't do this, you'll see vibration in flight, and the vibration reduces the amount of power available, and your flight is not as long. When you purchase the Gizmo Geyser prop assembly, you'll get a very detailed set of instructions. Actually, they call it a user manual. But essentially, you'll see this discussion. There's your prop drive spinner. There's the tension spring. There's the prop. Here's the thrust line adjustment screw. And this is the prop shaft drive, which comes out the rearward end of the assembly. And this is the sleeve clevis, which with this pin holds the front end of the rubber motor, and you quick connect and disconnect the motor to the prop shaft drive. When you're winding the rubber motor, you attach this winder attachment here. So that last picture was something I had copied, I think, from the website, the Gizmo Geyser website, and this is actually the user manual. Describes how to use the prop. Believe me, it's a lot easier than it sounds. It's just a wonderful, wonderful invention. One of the things that my mentor, John Hutchinson, told me or taught me was to give the nose block a coating of CA. And here I'm putting on some medium CA onto the front of the nose block. And because the wood is somewhat soft and you want it to be durable, and it's going to be around lube and all sorts of things. So you'll get CA everywhere unless you do this correctly. So notice I'm using a Sharpie pen here as a little holder. There's a little gap. And I'm going to put a few drops of CA here. And then I smear the CA all around on the side edges and everything. I've got a Ziploc bag over my fingers, and this is an amazing thing because CA will not stick to that bag, so you're using it sort of as a brush. Notice here that I've marked the top of the nose block with a colored pencil. You want to do that because you always want to insert the nose block in the correct orientation to make sure you have the proper down thrust and right thrust. I can't tell you how many times I've been at contests and people have had models that seemingly are flying pretty well. All of a sudden on the next flight, boom, they go straight into the dirt. Well, what happened? They inserted the nose block upside down and didn't realize it. Sometimes people use keys, uh, little engaging slots and protrusions, and sometimes even cut off a corner of the plug and put some balsa wood or hardwood in the front of the front end of the fuselage, so that the nose block can only be inserted in the proper orientation. That's a lot of extra work. I think it's simpler just to mark it this way. So before you glue the base of the gizmo geezer prop assembly into the hole in the nose block, you need to make sure that you use this plastic washer that comes with the gizmo geezer, or with the it might come with the optional parts pack. The reason for this is there's not much area here, and if this is soft balsa, then you're not going to hold proper alignment of the gizmo geezer prop assembly relative to the nose block. So this plastic washer gives a larger seating area and takes care of that. So what you want to do is take that washer and slip it over here. It has 3 grooves to receive these ribs. You slip it over this, put it up against there. This picture shows the base of the gizmo geezer prop assembly after I put a dab of white Elmer's glue on each of the ribs. Boy, you don't want to get super glue anywhere near this assembly, or it'll weep into the shaft, it'll freeze it, and you'll be done. This is water soluble. Worst case scenario, I could dissolve any glue away that I don't want. Some people use epoxy, and I've heard that some people even use Duco for this. But again, my mentor, John Hutchison, said use white glue. So he was the expert. I go with what the expert says. So now you have this completed nose block and propeller assembly. Could use some better sanding, but I wanted it to be, it's kind of rough. I wanted it to be snug, so I got it snug and I left it that way. I didn't sand anymore. Now, the final step here is to do some initial thrust line settings. When you get this gizmo geezer prop assembly, it comes with a neutral thrust line adjustment. This face here is equally spaced all the way around to the face behind it. There's about a 32nd of an inch gap here. So most free flight rubber powered models need some down thrust and some right thrust. How much depends on the nature of the model and a lot of other factors, but there's a general range which is pretty good. And for this Three Nite P-30, it's good to start out with about 2 degrees of right thrust and about 5 degrees of down thrust. According to the Gizmo Geezer user manual, each complete turn, that is one full revolution of any adjusting screw, will shift the thrust line approximately 2.5 degrees. So this is what I recommend that you do. First, insert the end of the Allen wrench into the 10 o'clock screw as shown in this picture. Notice I've got the spinner in this position, so there's clearance for the Allen wrench to be inserted into this screw. You'll have to kind of snug it in there, urge it in there, and you'll feel when it's seated. So give this 10 o'clock screw 2 counterclockwise turns. Then give the 2 o'clock screw approximately 2.5 counterclockwise turns. This is a top view of the nose block inserted into the front end of the fuselage after making the adjustments of the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock screws. So you can see here that there's a very slight amount of right thrust. Looks like it should be about 2 degrees. Again, this is a top view. This is a side view, and it's showing there's considerable down thrust, which should be about 5 degrees. Again, to repeat, this is a top view showing about 2 degrees of right thrust, and this is a side view showing about 5 degrees of down thrust. Now, once you get out in the field, you may find that you want a little bit more or less right thrust. You might want a little bit less down thrust. This has to do with trimming. It's a very complicated subject, but without down thrust, what'll happen is the model will just loop. You need down thrust to prevent it from looping. You need right thrust to prevent the model from rolling to the left when you launch it because of the torque of the rubber motor and how that is related to the fuselage longitudinal axis. Now, you don't have to use a gizmo geezer prop assembly with the Three Nite P-30. My original prototype just had the check propeller here, and here's the nose block, and it had a standard hook, actually prop shaft with a hook on it. And because there's no spring tensioner, I have these retaining ears and rubber bands that go around. There's little toothpicks in the nose block to hold the nose block on, because all the turns can go out and this theoretically could fall off. You do the thrust line adjustments simply by sanding the front end of the fuselage or by inserting shims, and once you got the shim right, you glue it in place. A lot easier to turn those screws, adjustment screws, in a gizmo geezer, but this will work. And the hook, prop shaft hook to motor peg distance is about 19 inches here, close to it, which is about what a 6x1/8 rubber motor measures in length. And so you don't really have to worry too much about having you don't have a spring tensioner, but that's fine. There is a ramp on the front of these propellers that supposedly gives you freewheeling. It's not very reliable because any tension on the rubber motor will pull the dog against the prop and stop it from spinning. They will work in most cases. There is a modification which is legal. You can do a tube-in-tube clutch that's legal under the P-30 rules. I call that a Budenbaum clutch, invented by my friend Stan Budenbaum, who's an incredible rubber-powered flyer. Everybody knows him for gliders, but boy, can he fly rubber-powered models. Anyway, there is some literature on the internet which incorrectly gives credit for that tube-in-tube clutch to Mr. Struck. It's actually Stan's design. In this picture, you can see I've retrofitted my original Three Nite P-30 with a gizmo geezer prop assembly and a new nose block. I probably did this just to make thrust line adjustments easier. So this concludes this video, which describes the nose block and prop assembly for the Three Nite P-30 if you were going to use the Gizmo Geezer prop assembly. I think for $15, it's the best investment you could make in terms of modeling. Thank you for watching this video.